Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to introduce a colleague of mine, Rita Redswood, a graduate student in public administration and author of many books in the genre of fantasy romance and horror romance. At the age of 22, she has already made a remarkable impact on young people, and she will comment on the special responsibility she has as a writer to maintain the trust of her young readers. Rita, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure to be here as well, Stu.
Thank you.
So thank you.
So the question is, what responsibility do you have having thousands of readers of many ages, but of young people perhaps in particular?
So I feel like part of the responsibility I have with just having such a young audience for some of my books is just that I need to be sometimes careful of the language I use. And since I do write horror novels, occasionally there are some darker tones in my books. But I feel like it's my responsibility to go ahead and at least censor some of the curse words I use in my writings. It does make the text sometimes look a little odd since there's asterisks in the middle of a word. But I feel like since I know that I have readers sometimes under the age of 18, I need to go ahead and put that in there because just to be responsible to their parents and everything, and even though if their parents don't know that they're reading the book or not, that makes me feel better that I can at least put that censor in there just to kind of hold some responsibility.
As a writer who is herself quite young, what do you think your strongest teachings are, if I could put it that way, to young readers?
I think one of the strongest ones is just part of it is being reliable, because sometimes reliability is hard to come by. When we go through our daily lives, you might expect somebody to get back to you on an email, or even like in the academic setting, for some of my readers who are college students as well, sometimes professors might not grade a paper right away, and it's kind of frustrating. So I feel like going ahead and making sure my readers know that they can count on for me to update regularly is a huge kind of responsibility to have, just so that they know it's like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and update 3 chapters a week, or on my other site 2 chapters a week, and they can count on that, so that it's not all of a sudden, oh, there's no chapters this week, what happened? It's like, no, if something does come up in my schedule, I do tend to let my readers know. It's like, hey, it's like I'm not going to update this week, or I write ahead of time, so sometimes some weeks I'll be writing 6 or 9 chapters so that I can do the next weeks and still keep that schedule going for them.
Well, I have a few questions about that and when you started, but let's hold that. I want to ask a broad question, and that is, do you have any observation about the contemporary culture in our country and how that compels a special responsibility to reach young people and educate them to help them face challenging culture?
I feel like in some respects being an author is in this kind of more contemporary world is to stick to your own values. So one of the things in my books, especially since I do have a younger audience, is I refuse to write any sex scenes in my books just because I know I have readers under 18, and as a parent I wouldn't want my kid reading that if they were under 18. And it's just kind of like making sure that I hold to that value regardless of the culture around, since that tends to happen a lot on shows even for younger viewers anymore. So I guess using that as an example is just kind of sticking to your values that you have in your writing and making sure that you're not adjusting to fit with the culture, but you still kind of keep your own personal integrity.
And what kind of feedback have you gotten from your readers, both young and old, about the value of these integrity ideals that you espouse?
So, I mean, usually conversations of where I'm like, no, I'm not going to write a sex scene in my book, it usually goes over pretty well. I've found that when you have a reader who's wanting something or that you don't agree with, or they're making even a critique of your work, is there seems to be on the internet a lot of just like blowing up almost of an issue that's kind of doesn't need to be blown up. It's kind of just going ahead and maintaining a polite atmosphere between the two parties so that you can have like basically just casual, decent dialogue with the other person and maintaining kind of that trust between it. It's like if I went ahead and went to a reader who's critiquing my work or is demanding something that I don't agree with, and I'm like, no, why are you doing that? That's ridiculous. And I feel like that would portray me as a pretty poor author because that means I can't take critiques. So I feel like going ahead and saying, you know what, actually that's a pretty good point. If they're critiquing my work, it's like I'll try to adjust that, or I'm writing like this because that's how I was taught, but I can understand your opinion as well. I feel like keeping it polite as well as understanding of the other person and where they're coming from is very vital, especially in a culture where sometimes that doesn't happen.
I see. Your works are digitally featured, and there are hard copies that you can get, and I'm privileged to have one. Would you care to comment on some of the advantages of digital publication and some of the disadvantages, and perhaps of social media?
So I feel like the advantages of the digital is obviously you can reach a wider audience. I mean, I have international readers, which I most definitely wouldn't have been able to obtain so quickly if I had gone the traditional publishing route. So it is nice to go ahead and have that aspect. I feel like another pro is by me not just going straight to publishing and uploading on these sites before I publish the books, is I can get valuable feedback from my readers before I even publish the book. So when I'm going through and editing my work, since I am my own editor as well, is I can take some of that advice into account when I'm making those edits. So it's kind of just like, so in some of my earlier works, my grammar might have not been the best, and some of my readers pointed that out to me, so I tried to address that when I'm editing the book as well as my future writings as well. So those are definitely some of the pros. I feel like a con would just kind of be the fact that it definitely is it's almost harder to market in a sense, just because I do have my works available already, and understanding sometimes with economic conditions being rough, or just kind of when you just don't have a lot of money because you're a college or a high school student, it makes sense that you're not going to go buy a $12 book when you have it available right there to you. And even though that is a con, I still do like having most of my books free in a sense to my readers, just because it gives them that opportunity to read those. I had that opportunity when I was younger, and it helped me a lot through school and stress. So I like to maintain that to a degree for my readers as well.
Well, that's amazing. Really, that's an incredible gift, generosity. When did you start writing? You're 22, so and you've written 9 published novels and others as well. When did you start?
So, kind of my love for writing began back in the 6th and 7th grade, so about 11 years now. So it's been a while. I mean, I didn't really, and that's because I had these 2 great English teachers who, at the time, I hated grammar. It was definitely a weak point of mine. So, but my teachers did is they never focused on your kind of weaknesses in your writing. They just really promoted your strengths, and if your content was well plotted out and everything, they really acknowledged that, and they kind of encouraged you to keep going with it. So that really made me love writing, because it wasn't like, hey, you missed 20 commas, this sucks. It was more like, you actually wrote a pretty good plot. It's like, keep doing what you're doing. So that really pushed me forward in it, and because of, I guess, some like school issues later on, as well as just the homework load, my writing dwindled until I got to the summer after my senior year of high school, where I really had an opportunity to just sit down and try writing. And I guess so now, what I'm doing now has been going on for about 4.5 years. So.
Through your entire college career, how did you do that? Because you graduated at a very high level, excellent grade point average. Keeping that up, and you were a teaching assistant and a proctor while you were writing many novels. How'd you do it?
A lot of time management. Now I know a lot of people say make sure you manage your time well, but it is very important that you do that. And I guess also for me, my writing became a huge focal point of my life. So even though I had my school work and everything and I had other commitments, I made that a huge commitment of mine regardless. So even if I had like 5 exams one week, I would force myself to go ahead and allot maybe 10 to 12 hours that week regardless for my writing. It was hard to do sometimes and it was stressful, but I feel like to maintain kind of that integrity between my readers and I had to go. There is sacrifice when you're doing writing and you're going ahead and writing that many novels as well on top of schoolwork. I mean, sometimes you don't really have a social life. Sometimes you're cooped up in a room for like 8 hours during the day when you want to go outside or something, and you kind of just have to really make those sacrifices to make that possible and just keep managing your time well. It's like, so what I like to do is I plan sometimes a month in advance for my writing, and that way it's like, hey, I have an exam 2 weeks down the road. I might want to do extra writing this week so that I can actually study during that week for my exam when I have more free time now. So.
Well, I'm just wondering if you'd like to say anything to your readers without provocation from a question. Anything else you'd like to add and tell them using this opportunity to communicate to them?
I guess one of the major things is just thank you for all of the support you guys have given me. That's been a huge vital point to me continuing my writing. If I didn't get the feedback that I did receive when I first started publishing, I probably wouldn't be where I'm here now. And I guess also it's kind of just sticking through some of my rougher grammar points. I know that in my first 2 novels that I used either furthermore or therefore a lot, and I got some critiques on that. So just thanks for sticking with me through it all and kind of just keep giving me comments and feedback. And honestly, just hearing your guys' comments really makes a huge difference. It kind of gives me that support too. Just hearing it's like, hey, this like chapter really made my day or my week. It's like, yeah, I did something good. Especially when sometimes during your school or academic career or even just in life you have some really rough weeks. So just getting that like nice feedback is almost, to me, it's like almost having like a piece of cake, which I love. So it's nice to have. So thank you to all of my readers. I really appreciate it.
This has really been wonderful. I'd just like to make a few comments too about the nature of integrity that you exhibit so well. I think the first thing that I really want to point out is how your teachers, or maybe that one teacher, had such a powerful impact. And that relates to the interview we had last month with Janice Johnson, whose mother provided the painting materials. This is so critical to provide inspiration to young people, and that's what you're doing. You're passing that along, and you're giving them a great value structure too. You're showing up, keeping your promise to have the installment that you promised, so they never have to worry about that, and you're engaging in feedback, so you respect them. And you also lead them too, so not to have profanity or have the asterisk in there to mediate that. And I just think that you're showing a tremendous amount of integrity, which is great because you have helped me teach that at the university. And so it's just a pleasure and an honor to work with you and to know you.
Well, it's a pleasure to know you as well, Stu.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's great. So there's a lot in this interview with Rita, a remarkable young person who has embraced so many of the promises and responsibilities we associate with integrity. But I think the lesson that stands out the most is how her gift as a writer and the inspiration she provides to thousands of readers and followers was itself the product of the dedication and inspiration of her own teachers. So what is the law of small things? Make a gift to others of the talent that someone saw in you and helped you develop?